Mark slept in, mostly. He rolled over around 9 a.m. and popped an old Johnny Cash cassette tape into his vintage Sanyo boombox, which sits on the stand next to his bed. Then he pulled the covers back over his body as the full-throated croon of the man in black echoed through the room. By the time side A was over, the mid-morning sun reluctantly slid through the windows on the east side of the home like a toe dipped into spring waters. Mark is the son of a doctor, but this home doesn't belong to his father. Mark's room is only one of a few in this house. Mark wound up here after a curious episode involving a can of hairspray, a lighter, and a razor blade. It's a long story. He shares this room with the ghost of a man who overdosed on heroin back in 1992. That was the year this group home was opened. In the 30 years between the death of Mr. Jones, this room's first drug-addled resident, and Mark, the current tenant, 8 other men slept here, and 2 women, briefly during a period when the agency wanted to try to integrate services for all sexes, which didn't quite work out because apparently housing mentally ill and developmentally disabled men with the opposite gender can actually be kind of dangerous, especially because staff supervision was more lax during this time. So when a resident, collectively known as Cowboy, was found crying, chest heaving, sobbing aloud about Miss Ruby, his friend, what kicked off was the final straw in the decision to reevaluate current operations. And Miss Ruby left the home to spend the rest of her days just 22 feet away from a nurse's station after a brief stay in the ICU. By the end of the week, Cowboy had already forgotten what he did. He was far too distracted by his new bed and roommate. In the old home, Cowboy was allowed to go outside and smoke, but here there were more restrictions. Here, he couldn't see his parents, and he had no friends. Cowboy wished he could go back to his home again, where they wake you up at 6 a.m. and help you get ready for your daily appointments and feed you breakfast, eggs, and biscuits, the smell of them coming from the kitchen. Mark doesn't notice the scent and just tries to sleep in, but he gets woken up at 7 to take his meds. He lays back down but has trouble falling asleep until a new Johnny Cash song starts playing, which he doesn't recognize. And he's listened to this album hundreds of times. He thinks so hard about how this new song got onto his old tape, his brain was finally able to drift off into sleep, but in his dream, the song still plays. But the voice is different. It sounds louder. And there is no percussion, and his father is singing, and in walks his mother, she's smiling, and that's all Mark remembers when he wakes up at 10:30 and finds he is bleeding. He starts screaming. The staff rushes in, demanding to know what the yelling is all about, but all Mark can do is show them his wounds and his hands, which are clean mostly, but Mark could see blood dripping off his fingertips, pouring from his wrists. Mark has to be transported to the hospital via ambulance, but the paramedics are too scared to take him the entire way and had to call for police intervention, not even a block after pulling out of the home's driveway. After a several-day admittance and a change in medications, Mark is better. And the best part about hallucinated wounds is there aren't any scars, at least none visible on his skin. So Mark is sent back to his room, his food delivered to him for a day or two. The staff usually doesn't do this, requiring residents to come to the dining room for meals, but Mark's doctor thought it might be best to isolate him briefly while he adjusts to the new chemicals in his head. It was only on his second day back in his haunted room when a member of the staff found Mark with a cord wrapped around his neck. His face, once pale, then blue, is now gray. It turns out the overnight shift had several other problems to contend with, like another resident caught smoking in the bathroom. So when Mark awoke shortly after midnight, and an argument could be made, he never fell asleep at all. He found the house too quiet and figured it was a good time to solve all the world's problems. He sawed the cord off his vintage Sanyo boombox, and while Johnny Cash sang, he tied it tight with a knot he learned as a Cub Scout in the 3rd grade. He couldn't breathe, but it felt good to know he'd finally get some sleep. Thank you.